We got some breaking news from the NFL world today. So, former Indianapolis Colts head coach, former Eagles offensive coordinator Frank Reich has now been hired by the Carolina Panthers.
Somewhere along those lines. Happy
I like those
Halloween
glasses. I like those glasses, dude. They're
Tonight's
nice.
gonna be a thriller!
Have I told you I worked at the World Series? It was my first year at the stadium. I went to Fanatics Fest, I went to Comic-Con, and I went to the World Series. It was my first year at the stadium, and the Yankees made it all the way to the World Series. Unfortunately, we lost 5 games to the Dodgers.
I said the Giants will be a perfect fit for John Harbaugh because you already established the quarterback situation. You already established the running back position. You already established the right receiver position, and you have the top 5 pick in the draft.
Todd Bowles, at best, is a mediocre coach. He did the same situation with the Jets back in 2015, ultimately maliciously ruining a power-hungry Baker Mayfield and potentially Mike Evans.
But Indianapolis ultimately came back, got the go-ahead touchdown. Then, at the end of the game, when Brady got the ball less than a minute, Peyton had his head down the entire time because he knew Brady had enough time. But the interception happened. It's funny. All of a sudden, Peyton Manning hears the crowd roaring. He finally looks up and starts jumping up and down real.
Good evening, folks. It is that time, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The bad news was I wasn't here for the 3-point blitz earlier today due to circumstances. The less said, the better. But the good news is, in our 8 p.m. slot, everything on the table, episode 11, will continue fresh off the NFL draft, fresh off our first elimination of the NBA playoffs.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm back from vacation. What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Agent Warrior X, a.k.a. Agent Warrior, and I'm back with another mission. Today, ladies and gentlemen, is Tuesday, April 28th, 2026. Now, I gotta say, my trip to Vegas that was absolutely amazing last week because not only I went to see WWE World on Sunday, but I went to like a few events, like going to Outback, going to certain areas I love, including arcade, bowling. I even went to Caesar Sportsbook in Paris Hotel almost the whole week. The whole week I went to Paris Caesar Sportsbook. And to tell you the truth, recently I have been playing a lot of retro games. I have been playing Tomb Raider 2. And Tomb Raider 2 is one of those best games because Lara Croft is one of the greatest characters in '96, right? You don't get it?
Could you please repeat?
I said was Tomb Raider 2 was the best game in '97. This after the sequel of the first Tomb Raider game. I was playing the Tomb Raider trilogy on the PS5. In fact, I have the strategy guide with me. It's a little blurry, so give me a minute. So yeah, this is the strategy for Tomb Raider 2. And let me tell you this. Tomb Raider 2 was by far one of the greatest sequels of all time. You could also argue and say NBA Street Volume 2. But back then in the 90s, sure you had Sonic. Sure you had Mario. Sure you had other consoles competing in the 90s. But Tomb Raider was entering the mid 90s while the Bulls, Yankees, and the Packers won the Super Bowl, NBA Finals, and the World Series. Tomb Raider was one of those games that everybody got into. And it's facts too.
It sounds like an amazing time, but glad you enjoyed it and glad you're officially back, although you were back last week.
Yeah, and I was back only for a vacation though. So, without further ado, let's start the show off by saying the NFL draft was very chaotic. The first round was just pure chaotic. The first pick, no shocker, We know Fernando Mendoza was going to go to the Raiders. Pick 2, David Bailey over Arvell Reese for the New York Jets. In my opinion, David Bailey is another good edge rusher, but I think he won't be lasting long because a lot of people projected Arvell Reese would be on the Jets. We'll get to that pick later. Now, the third one had me shocked. Jeremiah Love to the Cardinals. My honest question for the Cardinals front office, what were they thinking? What were they thinking in terms of taking a running back when you have James Conner and Tyler Algier?
Arizona Cardinals, they so throughout the years have mind-boggled us on so many occasions with decisions that just did not make sense or set their franchise back. And in this case, when you know you don't have a quarterback, this is what you do. You need a quarterback. You need some help on your offensive line. You're in a full-blown rebuild and you get another running back, which was the least of your needs on offense at the moment.
I don't know which one was worse: drafting Kyler Murray and overpaying paying the big bucks for him, or drafting Jeremiah Love. Either way, this is a lose-lose situation because the level of intellects of the front office is way beyond anything in this world. All right, way beyond anything. Same with the New York Jets. This is the front office. This is the fans' wants and needs, the necessities. The front office, they're over there. They're over there. That's all. That's where they are. They're over there. They don't care about the fans. So with the fourth pick, the Tennessee Titans selected Cardell Tate. In my opinion, Cardell Tate was a very solid pick because the Titans need a wide receiver one badly. But here's the question I'm going to ask. Didn't you pay the big bucks to Wan'Dale Robinson? Because it seems like you did.
I mean, well, for the Titans, though, obviously, I get what they're looking to do. They need a wide receiver. So here they go. They go and get themselves another weapon to throw the ball to, but how's this going to work out in the long term? I don't know, man.
And then with the fifth pick, the Giants selected Arvell Reese. How do the Jets and Cardinals pass up on Arvell Reese and Ruben Bain? This is another prospect that everybody's been talking about. How do they pass up on these two defensive players? One from Miami and one from Ohio State. Keep in mind, Ohio State is at a juggernaut when it comes to football. And I'm pretty much shocked that we got Arvell Reese over Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles, which a lot of Giants fans wanted Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles. But here's the real question. If you're projected to go, let's say a top defensive offensive player, would you draft that? You would. You would draft that, would you, Dickie? So the Cardinals are the biggest losers, in my opinion, because having already cut Kyler Murray only for you guys to pay the big bucks to him, and then just for you guys to get Tyler Algier and James Carter coming back. So why need another running back if you already established a running back room? Sometimes I don't get front offices like that. And yes, I got 3 games on right now. I got the Hawks and the Knicks. I got the Sixers and the Celtics, and I got the Yankees and Rangers.
Yep, because it's that day. Now, for biggest winners and losers, I'm going to come out with a bit of a bold but cold take for everyone and a bit unpopular. It's too early to tell who the true winners and losers are because the draft just happened. Even though it's tradition that we come out and crown winners and losers right away, we still don't know for sure, really, not even rookie seasons, but so a few years down the line. Case in point, the 2021 quarterback draft class. the biggest QB draft flop of this decade. You had one of the most hyped up draft classes quarterback wise, and out of them, you first rounders. You had Trevor Lawrence, okay, kind of he's in meh throughout it, but then you had Trey Lance, bust, Mac Jones, bust as a starter. You've had Justin Fields, bust. I feel like I'm missing somebody else, and Zach
Is
Wilson, bust.
Yeah, Zach Wilson. Was Daniel Jones a bust?
That was
I
two.
think
What year was he? 2019 was
2019.
Daniel.
2019 was Daniel Jones. But if I'm gonna say the next pick, why would the Chiefs trade up for Mansour Lane with their already projected to draft him at 9? This is sometimes I don't get front offices sometimes. With the 7th pick,
Paranoid, maybe?
Yeah, you could say that. With the 7th pick, the Commanders selected Sonny Styles out of Ohio State. Now, this is a good pick, in my opinion, because the Commanders, despite having the oldest team in football, they needed a wide receiver, they needed edge rusher, and they still needed a linebacker, which I think Sonny Styles, in my opinion, is a really great pick. The 8th pick from the Saints got Jordan Tyson. Really solid, really great pick if you think about it for the Saints wide receiving room. Think when you have Tyler Shough as your franchise quarterback, you still got a lot of great protection. But ultimately, what would you rather do when it comes to having receiving core? Sure, Jordan Tyson is a really good receiver, but here's my problem with Jordan Tyson. He's injury prone sometimes. And I think the Saints made the right move in terms of that. With the 9th pick, the Cleveland Browns selected Spencer Fano from Utah. Another offensive lineman to protect Shador Sanders. Is that going to help them? Yes, but they still need a receiver. If you want to talk about biggest winners, it will have to be none other than Denzel Washington. He could bring a look. He could help Jack. He could help Shador to throw the ball to instead of just giving it to Quinshawn Judkins. With the 10th pick of the 2026 NFL Draft, the Giants select Francis Mauigoa from Miami. Now, this, in my opinion, is a really good pick. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, you passed out Caleb Downs. Well, to tell you the truth, here's the explanation why the Giants took Francis Mauigoa over Caleb Downs. You need dart protected, right? If you have a franchise quarterback, upcoming future quarterback with Jackson Dart, the golden rule when it comes to giving your franchise quarterbacks is get some protection for your quarterback and weapons while you're at it. You have Isaiah Likely. You have Darnell Mooney. You have Malik Neighbors. Potentially Odell Beckham Jr. coming back to the Giants. And now you have Malachi Fields. If anybody who's a true winner, it has to be the New York Giants. Because the way how they drafted 2 first round into a defensive player and an offensive player, I think Francis Mauigoa is a really good pick in my opinion. But he literally what he said about it starts about protecting Jackson Dart. He literally said something familiar with Will Campbell did. He said he will die to protect Dart. And you know what? I don't blame him. He wants to protect Dart. Be my guest, Francis, or CC Mauigoa, they should say. But I think, in my opinion, the Giants did very good alongside Dallas, too. Miami selected Caden Proctor. The Cowboys traded that pick to the Dolphins, which they picked Caden Proctor, and they selected Caleb Downs. Understandably, this pissed some Giants fans off. Which I don't blame them. But what would you rather have if you think about it? Would you rather draft 2 defensive Buckeyes players that don't get dart protection, or draft a defensive player and offensive player to protect dart and help with your front defense? But the front 4 defense now looks elite. Kayvon Thibodeau still in trade talks. But you have Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and now you have Arvell Reese. On paper, that looks like a scary defense, in my opinion. No way. I think that's going to be a double. I'm watching the Yankees right now. They scored 1-0.
And speaking of score updates, also we got Sixers Celtics 57-50 at halftime, Boston. So it's still a 7-point game, but it is a Boston lead, and seeing how the series is gone, it's most likely going to play out in their favor. And then when it comes to picks, what was smart was what the Rams did. Trade up, get Ty Simpson, let him sit with under Matthew Stafford and learn from him under a head coach in Sean McVay, who's had a winning record in all but one season, led the Rams to 2 Super Bowls, and led them to a Super Bowl win since he took over as their head coach in 2017. That's the smart thing to do to properly develop Ty Simpson, which actually for him is better than going to a team like the Cardinals or a team like the Jets.
To tell you the truth, I was going to say that was by far one of the blunderous picks for the Rams. Same with the Arizona Cardinals. They should have never took Jeremiah Love, in my opinion, because what was the point of taking a running back when you already addressed the running back room with Tyler Algier and James Conner potentially coming back? What was the point of that? Now for the Rams, I understand because Matt Stafford's getting old, but taking a quarterback that sucked, I don't see this as a really good move. Nice catch, by the way.
And then the Ravens, to their credit, they were smart, at least tried to go get a top prospect offensive guard. Now you're hoping you got someone who can help protect Jackson Dart. Smart move by the Ravens on paper, but time will tell if it plays off. But I like the idea.
You mean the Giants, right? Smart to protect Jackson
the Ravens.
Dart. The Ravens with Lamar Jackson. That was with Lamar Jackson.
You're the Ravens. That's what the Ravens did get. Ione from Penn State.
Now, I know a lot of people are going to say that the Giants lost the draft, but also they didn't. Not because they just passed on Caleb Downs twice. Specifically, you need to get Jackson Dart protection and increase your chances of having a great defensive team. Now, if you want to talk about John Harbaugh decisions, that's on Harbaugh. Harbaugh sometimes makes some good decisions, and sometimes he doesn't. But I'm starting to see some smoke around Odell Beckham Jr. coming back to the Giants. If it's true that Odell Beckham Jr. could come back to the Giants, I'm starting to see a 180 type of the New England Patriots drafting New England Patriots resurgence.
Yep, and it'll certainly be interesting to wait and see what happens, but then you also got the Eagles going with Makai Lemon from USC at number 20. Well, I was thinking, some fans were thinking lean more toward the offensive line because they're getting old. Get somebody young while you can. But they went with the receiver, which makes it even more obvious to me. They're going to trade A.J. Brown. How many receivers have you brought in now? Brought Wicks, Hollywood Brown, Elijah Moore, and now you drafted a receiver from USC. Pretty obvious they're going to eventually move on. But it'll be interesting to see how Lemon develops under the team. It's obvious they're going with Devontae Smith as their number 1 receiver next year. This is an interesting pick. I'm curious how this one's going to pay out. And then the Eagles go and pull off a trade with the Vikings, get themselves a pass rusher that you're hoping will fill Jalen Phillips' void. We'll see if that works, because you're talking about a guy in Greenard who had 2 really good seasons sack-wise, 2 seasons over 12 sacks. You're hoping he can fill that void because you need an edge and you need a linebacker. All right, I like that, the idea of it. But hey, if he fits in with Fangio's system, then awesome. But time will tell on that one.
Now, for draft memories, this is the next topic I want to talk about, is draft memories. 2 years ago, this was by far the best quarterback draft class they had with Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and potentially Bo Nix. In my opinion, Bo Nix was a really good pick. Drake May was a great pick, and of course, Caleb Williams is also another great pick too. So I'm going to put it this way and say that the the 2024 draft class was amazing. You had some studs like Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, Malik Neighbors, etc. But what surprised me during that draft is that they drafted Michael Penix. Why would they take a Washington quarterback when they already paid the big bucks to Kirk Cousins? Sometimes it's like either the most blunderous pick they had. Oh my God, what a catch from Bellinger! It's either they botched the offseason or they messed up big time. Either way, I don't know what to say, but in my opinion, that was by far the most blunderous move they've ever did. And then they cut Kirk Cousins just for just for the Cousins to go to the Raiders to help Fernando Mendoza. I don't understand that sometimes.
And that clearly the Falcons made the biggest mistake in that draft class, just in terms of purely dumb decision making. Now, a team who's ultimately flopped in the time since are the Minnesota Vikings for taking J.J. McCarthy, although I'm not as hard on them because it made sense at the time. You lost Cousins, you went to Atlanta, you needed a quarterback. Going and drafting J.J. McCarthy made perfect sense at the time. Unfortunately, durability has been his biggest problem thus far, and that's why they brought in Kyler Murray on a one-year prove-it deal to see if he can resurrect his career there. But the Michael Penix one it made no sense. And they drafted a guy who had an unquestionable injury history going into the pros. Year one, he comes in late in the season when you're still making a playoff push. Year two, he struggles, gets injured. Cousins takes over and plays significantly better, only for him to leave.
Sometimes I don't understand Kirk Cousins nor the Vikings front office. But either way, this was by far one of the worst things they've ever done. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the playoffs so far for the NBA. So far, the Knicks are leading against the Hawks. No shocker. The Celtics and the Sixers are at halftime. And eventually, we're either going to get the Lakers tonight or the Spurs. Because I have a gut feeling that LeBron is going to finish the Rockets off. I have a gut feeling they're going to finish the Rockets off. The next thing I want to say is that if the Sixers can put up a fight in the second half against the Celtics, I can see this going at least 6 or 7 games.
And I will say that, you know what's funny? The Magic now have a 3-1 lead on the Pistons. And all we can think is, we've seen this movie play out before. And last time it did, guess what? The Pistons were the 1 seed, Magic were the 8 seed. It's just so ironic that it's
and the crazy part about it is that the
seed.
Magic made it to the finals. The Magic made it to the finals that year.
This was actually, but we remember most was 2003 when the Magic had a 3-1 lead with Doc Rivers as their coach and T-Mac. And T-Mac's post-game press conference where he goes, "It feels so good to move on to the second round." This would be the start of a trend that would continue through Doc Rivers' career. Let's just say. But
you do realize
time,
that if you're up 3-1, never say it's so good to be in the second round. You have to get some results first. As Jay Banksy 22 would say, real team, real results. What a catch from Trent Grisham, by the way.
But this time, you're talking about a way different situation with the Magic being up 3-1. Different cast. And I got to ask the question, is Desmond Bane really the best player on the Magic? Because that could be up for debate between him, Boncaro, Wagner, and Suggs. I mean, no, with all due respect to those guys, but Bane's been really balling out for them, even going back to the play-in tournament. Has played a significant role in them.
All I'm going to say is that Paolo Banchero and Desmond Bane are the dynamic duo of the Magic. Similar to this dynamic duo with the Magic, Shaq and Penny Hardaway.
Yeah, that's been a really good duo, but the only question I have is, was it really worth the amount of picks they gave up to the Grizzlies? Time will tell on that one, especially a few years from now, see how those picks play out. But for now, the Orlando Magic have done excellent this series as the number 8 seed, really taking the fight to the Pistons. And since they expanded to best of 7 in the opening round for 8-1 upsets, we've had the Golden State Warriors with a Steven Jackson, Baron Davis, but those guys beat the Dirk-led Mavs 1 year after their first finals appearance. You've had the Grizzlies with a young Marc Gasol upset the Spurs. You had the Sixers beat the Bulls, but there's going to be a major asterisk on that one. And then, of course, you had the Heat topple. Who did they topple again in the opening round of 2023?
I think they toppled against the Bucks. I think it was the Bucks.
Yep, so the point is, we know it can still happen even in a best of 7 series. And the way this series is playing out right now, the Magic are really outplaying the Pistons, so don't be surprised if that's the upset. But we're talking about good series, though. Hawks and Knicks, I got to give credit to. That's been a really good series. You've had CJ McCollum stepped up in a few games, but now it's still tied 2-2. It's still anybody's series, so we're going to have to wait and see how that one plays out. But so far, that's been good. Sixers, Celtics, well, we kind of expected the Celtics to win. We knew realistically they were the better team, and so far they're doing that. In second half tonight's game, will it end tonight? We'll have to wait and see. But the biggest surprise of the Lakers dominating as much as they are without Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves, I'm like, really, Rockets? Your young core fell
And the
apart
reason why
that
they
quick?
and the reason why they're falling apart quick is because Kevin Durant has a significant amount of injury.
But that goes to show you right there why the Rockets took a risk on KD, knowing they needed that next guy to help them come playoff time. But now that he's not there, you see the results are significant. This is looking like the Warriors series from last year all over again, but against a stronger team in the Lakers. And then you had the Phoenix Suns. I'll give them this. They made the playoffs, but ultimately OKC Thunder predictably had their number and sent them home quickly in the opening round. No surprise there.
You know, another good matchup besides the Hawks and the Knicks is the Raptors and Cavaliers. We've seen these movies before when it comes to Canadian teams in the playoffs after that massive resurgence they had. Don't get me wrong, the Toronto Blue Jays had a massive resurgence, and the Raptors are in the playoffs this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Blue Jays try to make the playoffs later this year. Nice strike off of Cam Schlittler. And the inning's over. So far, the best series is the Knicks, Hawks, Raptors, and Cavaliers so far.
Yeah, and ironically, they're both coming from the East, but for the sad thing about it was for the Minnesota Timberwolves, they lost Anthony Edwards on Saturday night. And if there was ever a shot at a 3-1 comeback, it would be that series right there. I mean, it's still long shot,
I mean,
but
there again, it's still early, but I think Nikola Jokic could dominate.
yeah, because now all they need to do is just run the table and win those 2 games. But at the same time, all it takes is one loss for the Nuggets, and it's over. So we'll have to wait and so we're gonna have to see how that one goes, man. But if there was ever one series you could confidently bet on to be a comeback, it would be the Nuggets T-Wolves. We saw them come back yesterday. Jokic had a triple-double. Now game 6, we'll see if they can do the same. And for the T-Wolves, Julius Randle stepped up and played a good game yesterday and tried his best, but the rest of the team, looking at Rudy Gobert, yeah, expectations are on now.
Yep. And now, just recently, I think Shams tweeted about a NBA draft, right? They just Adam Silver just proposed an anti-taking rule, but I think, in my opinion, the 3-2-1 rule, with having the bottom team in relegation zone, I think this will be a massive loss for small marketing teams. But for the Nets, I think it could potentially be a winner because just recently, the Brooklyn Nets superfan, Mr. Whammy, is now on the NBA draft on May 10th with the selection of the Brooklyn Nets.
Ooh, it's going to be enticing come May 10th to see what happens there, but the opening round's still going on, and it's been a lot of action going on and a lot to talk about, but
Now,
see how that plays out.
speaking of playoff memories, the best playoff memories for for the um for the Eastern Conference wise has to be the Nets and the Bucks, specifically the 2021 series. And I think this was the best. This was a great series, but ultimately the Nets got out choked the Bucks.
And speaking of deja vu, with the Sixers and Celtics, it's deja vu. From 1984 to present, every playoff series those two teams have been matched up. It's been the Celtics winning. Hell, even 2002, Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker defeated the Sixers in the opening round, 1 year removed from a finals run for the Sixers, where Allen Iverson put on his Superman cape and carried the Sixers to the finals. So it's like, wow, with Sixers haven't been able to get one best-of-7 series win over the Celtics in that long, decades. That's talk about someone having your number when it matters.
Exactly. But I think, in my opinion, when it comes to these games, you think of the Sixers, Nets, right? The Sixers and Nets was just basically a clean sweep. Speaking of clean sweeps, nobody should be shocked about this whatsoever. Devin Booker's not only just cooked, but also Dylan Brooks is also making cooked as well. Dylan Brooks is a fossil at this point.
Well, we face it. We knew they were just lucky they even made it that far. But we clearly knew that the Denver Broncos. No, when was I think? We clearly knew that the Oklahoma City Thunder were the far better team, and ultimately, hey, it showed off. So congrats to the OKC Thunder. Let them move on to the second round. SGA did his thing. I mean, the Suns did their best they could, but clearly that's not enough to win when it matters most. And if we're talking about Eastern Conference, we got to remember there was the Central Division. There was two main rivalries historically come playoff time that have played a huge role in the Eastern Conference playoffs. It's Bulls Pistons, most notably the Bad Boy Pistons versus MJ's Jordans, which went on pretty much 4 straight years into the early 90s, and then Pacers Pistons, which went on in the early 2000s and crossed over into a regular season battle that became one of the darkest nights in NBA history. But
exactly, because the malice at the Palace was crazy. Yeah, Big Ben Wallace dominating against the Pacers, but ultimately that fight was the darkest moment in NBA history.
Now, when it comes to intra-divisional Eastern Conference rivalries, ones that stand out, you got Bulls Knicks, of course. Actually, there was 4 teams in the Eastern Conference in the 90s that all clashed in some way, shape, or form. Throughout that second half of the 90s, it was Bulls Knicks, Bulls Pacers, Knicks Pacers, Heat Knicks, even Heat Bulls from time to time. There may have been even a Heat Pacers clash thrown in there. It was those 4 teams that they shaped up the Eastern Conference. They were the main draw come playoff time. They were the 4 teams on everybody's radar. And then all of a sudden, when the Bulls were no longer a factor, it was down to 3: Pacers, Knicks, Heat, and that carried the momentum of the 99 and 2000 Eastern Conference portion of the playoffs.
Not only the 90s was dominant because of the Jordan era or the Knicks resurgence in 94, 99, but specifically the 2000s. The 2000s was the peak golden age of basketball. Specific, not because of the Lakers repeat, it's because they have some great moments like the New Jersey Nets trading for Jason Kidd, or the Nets getting Kenyon Martin out of the first overall pick, or better yet, those playoff rivalries. You mentioned playoff rivalries in the Eastern Conference, right? You did not mention the Nets and Pistons. You didn't mention the Nets and the Heat. You didn't mention the Nets and the Knicks, their own division rival. You didn't mention that either.
And another big one was also the Heat and Celtics in the early 2010s. That carried from through 2011 to 2013, but all 3 years it created marquee matchups between those two teams. The duo in Boston, well, originally Big Three, eventually turned duo by the 2013 series between them, when Ray Allen became the most hated player on Boston Celtics team by joining the Miami Heat. But that was a rivalry you would go in 3 straight years throughout the LeBron D-Wade era in Miami. If you want to talk playoff rivalries out west, noticeable ones, Lakers Kings. You also had Jazz Rockets throughout the 90s, Hakeem, and insert a second guy, some cases Clyde Drexler, but then going against Stockton, Malone, Jazz.
Yeah, I was going to say John Stockton. You forgot John Stockton. What about the Supersonics? The Supersonics in the 90s was also great too. Sean Payton, Sean Kemp, Gary Payton, etc.
You had them versus the Blazers. You even had Lakers and Blazers was an on and off rivalry come playoff time throughout the 80s, early 90s, and then again for a brief bit in the early 2000s. So that rivalry was on and off, went through different phases. Magic, Kareem versus Clyde Drexler. Then eventually you could pause for a little bit after that. And then it became the Trailblazers, who would eventually become the Jailblazers versus Kobe and Shaq for a bit before the Blazers completely fell apart. And yeah, we know the Lakers eventually split, but the Blazers were no longer a threat at that point. And then, of course, you had Lakers, Spurs.
Mavericks and the Spurs, Mavericks, Lakers. You forgot about the Mavericks rivalry because during that time in the 2000s, Dirk Nowitzki was dominant. Dirk Nowitzki was dominant that time alongside the Lakers. Don't forget San Antonio. San Antonio Spurs has a laundry list filled with playoff rivalries. You have the Knicks and Spurs. You have the Spurs and Lakers. You have the Spurs and Mavericks. You have the Spurs and Trailblazers, with Tim Duncan being dominant alongside Tony Parker and of course Oscar Robertson. Those were the Spurs players, especially that short Spurs series against the Nets in the 2003 finals.
And not to mention the Spurs out west, they stopped the Steve Nash and Amar'e Stoudemire-led Phoenix Suns from fulfilling the prophecy that they would be the duo to get Phoenix over the mountaintop. On numerous occasions, the Spurs had other plans for them, winning the 05 and 07 finals, crossing paths with the Phoenix Suns along the way.
The Cavaliers, in my opinion, was a strange run in 2007. That 2007 run where LeBron James is by far one of the most strangest runs besides the Nets making it to the playoffs and ultimately blowing up their roster the very next year.
Hey, that was one of the greatest individual playoff runs you've seen from a player. And there have been a lot of great individual playoff runs, but a lot of times you get either those great individual playoff runs that carry over into the finals or those great carry job runs that usually the finals or the conference finals are the final boss, where despite the players' best efforts, the team ends up being overwhelming, such as LeBron in 07, for example. The Spurs as a team were just too complete as a team, and they finally got him in the finals. Or AI basically becoming Superman in 01, but the Kobe Shaq duo also with other good role players such as was it? You had Brian Shaw,
Yeah, Brian
Bob
Shaw,
Horry.
Tyler Lue, Derek Fisher. Oh yeah, speaking of Ty Lue, that step where Iverson stepping over Ty Lue was crazy in 2001. That's the reason why my first team in basketball was the Sixers because of Iverson. Iverson was my idol. I grew up having his hairstyle, wearing like street clothes in school, and I wish I had a Sixers jersey, but not. I ultimately waited too long. Now this is the segment I want to talk about because this is about something with the in baseball related.
Luca
The Boston
recently
Red
in
Sox.
2022, another great run, but that Warriors team just too much when they got to the conference finals.
Now let's talk about the segment that I'm going to make. The Boston Red Sox on Sunday have terminated general manager Alex Cora after 6.5 years on the team after winning the World Series in 2018. And I think this is the smart move because they should have done that a long time ago. They should have fired Alex Cora a long time ago after that massive implosion against the Yankees in Game 3. When Cam Schlittler dominated the Red Sox, everything changed. And recently, when he started against the Red Sox, when he started recently against the Red Sox, he torched the Red Sox. He didn't just torch the Red Sox, he cooked them. Yes, Peyton Toll has 11 strikeouts alongside. Yes, Peyton Toll had 11 strikeouts, but ultimately, Cam Schlittler outlasted him. Despite all that, I think this was the right move, and they won 3 in a row. So I think, in my opinion, this was way overdue and about time. So my real question to all the Red Sox fans out there, as a Yankee fan, why the hell is Bristol still here?
And another team had the same problem too, and they just recently fired their manager, the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, while they didn't win a World Series, the parallels are, hey, here's a team who made it to the World Series, but in the time since have regressed, and your former manager was part of the problem. It wasn't fulfilling the prophecy they once lived up to, and finally the Phillies just made the move on from him. But I mean, who knows? Maybe this could help out. Lambert, last time they got rid of a manager midseason, worked out in their favor. But will it this time? Well, with the roster being different, I don't know. But the Phillies, it was awful, as well as the Mets too. That's crazy.
The crazy part about it is that both of them are second to dead last in the division in the National League East. Specifically, the Phillies. Yes, you may have a few moves like getting Kyle Schwarber back and Bryce Harper's running out of time. But I think on paper it's still great, but I think they're running out of time doing that. Now, as for the New York Mets, they spent nearly $1 billion over Juan Soto and other players, only to get outbested by the Reds. And now this year they're doing terrible. And the crazy part about it, to top all off, they got swept by the Colorado Rockies. Understandably, this pissed not only the Mets off, but also some diehard Mets fans as well.
Yeah, and this is ultimately your karma you get. So that's what happens when you when organizations make the wrong choice, it ultimately comes back to bite them later. Do we need to even go on about the sports examples? We could, but if we get on to too many, we'll be here all night.
So now that we got those things out of the way, the next topic I want to talk about is the best sitcoms. So in the very first episode of this show, you mentioned earlier the best sitcoms. You mentioned Friends. You mentioned Two and a Half Men. You mentioned Everyone Loves Raymond, etc. But I think, in my opinion, Two and a Half Men was a great sitcom, in my opinion. You can argue and say Friends. You could say You could say Martin Lawrence. You could say Prince, the Fresh Prince of Bel Air, or better yet, the best sitcom in Living Color. Living Color was also another good one in the '90s. So my top three best sitcoms Friends, Martin, and of course, Two and a Half Men. I gotta start catching up all the seasons of Two and a Half Men.
Yeah, I would say start with the earlier seasons where you had Charlie Sheen and John Cryer because the chemistry with those two was top notch. And the dynamics worked perfectly with Charlie Sheen's Charlie Harper bachelor character and his brother. When Charlie Sheen got fired from the show and they brought in Ashton Kutcher, the dynamics just weren't the same. And they took the show in a completely different direction than what they originally did. And it feels like two different shows. Charlie Sheen versus Ashton Kutcher. It's like that.
You know,
But
it's not only that, but Charlie Sheen could have done better. Yes, he was one of the few great actors for a TV show on TBS or TNT when it comes to Two and a Half Men. But to tell you the truth, it's still great. It's still a great show, though.
yep, but yeah, and here was another show that didn't have as long a run, but it was great while it lasted. My Wife and Kids from the 2000s.
I think that's another good one. But to tell you the truth, I think it's like 3 seasons. I think.
It was
I think it was
3
like
or 4. It
think
ended
it was-
prematurely, though.
I think, in my opinion, again, Martin Lawrence had about 5 seasons. Martin Lawrence for the 90s had like 5 seasons. And I think, to be honest with you, that show Martin, I like seasons 1 and 2 of Martin Lawrence because Martin's one of the greatest actors and comedians of all time, if not one of the greatest actors besides Will Smith. Now I know that duo between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith was the greatest duo in the 2000s, but in the 90s, with Will Smith and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was his prime, was part of his prime. Also, Martin Lawrence, his show Martin was also part his prime days too.
And you have a classic clip from The Fresh Prince is the clip where Jazz is on the drums, Will's dancing. That small scene has been parodied countless times with different songs voiced over the audio for that scene where he's dancing to Jazz's drums. That's one of the...
Yep. It eventually became a meme too.
And even the scene where, who was stuck in the house alone has been parodied countless times too for different situations. Like when so-and-so is asked to step up, or when so-and-so is the last person in the room loyal to whoever. We've seen that meme countless times.
What about that one with Will Smith accidentally burnt something in the kitchen? That became a meme when Russell Wilson was part of the Broncos.
Yep. And that's what makes it such a great show. And that show paved the way for Will Smith afterward. Paved the way for Bad Boys. Paved the way for Will Smith to play Muhammad Ali in a movie. Paved the way for his role in I Am Legend. Men in Black, so on and so forth.
What about Shark Tale? Shark Tale with Jack Black was also a great one, but in my opinion, that 2004 year with Shrek 2 and Shark Tale was criminally underrated besides that.
Oh, yeah, yep. You had... Oh, I remember actually seeing Shrek 2 in movie theater when it came out. I think it was February. It might have been around President's Day weekend.
I think it was around February or March, but this year celebrates 25 years of the first Shrek movie in 2001. I'm going to say this. Mike Myers did a great job as Shrek, not because of Austin Powers. Austin Powers was also a great movie too. But Mike Myers with Eddie Murphy, that was by far one of the few dynamic duos of cartoon animated movies.
Yeah, and Eddie Murphy, I remember one of the best one of the best comedians, one of the best on-screen and voice actors, if you combine the three. And that's what made Eddie Murphy so unique, was he was so versatile as a performer. He could do both the voice acting, comedy, and on-screen acting as well.
You know, I know a lot of people has crushes on celebrities, but back then, around like the 2000s, Angelina Jolie was also another celebrity crush as well. But the most forgetful movie that she did was Tomb Raider. Was Lara Croft Tomb Raider. Yes, I know it back then it was really hard for some actresses to portray as her in live action films. But the 90s of movies based on video games like Tomb Raider, Resident Evil, or Sonic, right? Or Mario Brothers. Speaking of Mario Galaxy movie was by far the greatest movie of this year so far. And in my opinion, those movies could have done better. But now next month we have Mortal Kombat 2 coming out. We already have the Michael Jackson movie already came out, and I've heard a lot of people say it's a really good movie. And in my perspective, I think the Mario Galaxy movie is really amazing that I saw earlier.
And I was just thinking about it, just randomly occurred to me. I remember when Chris Rock hosted the Oscars back in 2005. Speaking of actors, he claimed that Russell Crowe was the best period movie actor. And during that stretch, he was. I mean, Chris Rock made a great joke that illustrated perfectly that if you ask Russell Crowe to play a movie based on a certain time period, he would do all the research on whatever period, whether it be the movie Nuremberg, about the Nuremberg trials, the movie Gladiator, Cinderella Man. He would do his research on whatever era it was and whatever character he was cast to play and try to mimic their dynamics or their characteristics. Or even if it were more of a fictional timeline, he'd research and try to base it off that timeline. And that was what's been phenomenal of Russell Crowe. He still does that to this day. Easily
What about the recent joke on the Oscars with Robert Downey Jr. Chris Evans? That was by far one of the best jokes they've ever had before Doomsday comes out the next couple months. Now, the most hilarious part about that joke is that they took Channing Tatum's it was by far the most hilarious joke. And then Channing Tatum said, "I'm gonna need that back though." Now I know Channing Tatum is Magic Mike, and I know he's hilarious sometimes, but that was by far the most hilarious segment I've ever seen as a Marvel fan.
Yeah, let's see. What movies do we got? Let's take a quick look. Movies we got. Oh, Avengers Doomsdays later this year.
Doomsday. Yeah, Doomsday. You got Avengers Doomsday this year. You have the Street Fighter movie that's coming out this year. Mortal Kombat 2 is coming out next month. And the best part of it is they have two superhero movies, Supergirl and Spider-Man Brand New Day. Spider-Man Brand New Day. Yes, Spider-Man Brand New Day will have the Punisher. We've seen the comics of Spider-Man facing the Punisher. There's Cam Scatterboo, by the way. We've seen the Punisher in a few comics when it comes to Marvel. Now, I think I'm going to predict that this December, while the NFL season is still happening, Avengers Doomsday will outplay Doom Part 3. And I think Robert Downey Jr. will have an excellent role as Dr. Doom.
While we're at it, I was just providing a brief score update while I was browsing at it. You got Celtics are up 81-73 over the Sixers late in the third. That's going as we expected. Knicks and Hawks. Knicks are blowing out the Hawks in that one. We're still waiting on the Blazers and Spurs to come up around 9:30, so a little over a half hour away from that one.
You know what's crazy? During the First Take show, right, with Stephen A.
Of course, yep.
I think recently, before WrestleMania happened, Danhausen was the newest wrestler that came, and he cursed Stephen A. Smith, and then he was gone. Meanwhile, the Knicks are dominating against the Hawks. That's the crazy part about it.
Yeah, it's crazy. You had just about a week ago, people were talking about how the Hawks are going to have the Knicks. It's going to be the Knicks blowing it again in the playoffs. Well, right now it doesn't look like that's going to happen. The way it's going now, it's about to be 3-2 lead for the Knicks. Yeah, that
We
gives
don't
them
know. We
all the
don't know that
momentum.
yet because right now I think we're nearly at this at halftime. I think, but Cam Scottaboo was at the stadium. Was at the Garden tonight, and I think, in my perspective, if the Knicks continue to play like this, they have a shot to go back to the finals. If they don't face the Pistons or the Celtics.
Yeah, absolutely. If they can keep that going consistently, okay, it's going to be a fun ride. But, Knicks Celtics again. If that happens, that would be another rivalry. Here's another Eastern Conference rivalry I forgot to mention. This goes back late 80s, early 90s. The rivalry that put the bad boy Pistons on the map. Pistons Celtics against that big three, Bird, Parrish, McHale.
You know what's crazy? During the 90s, yes, the Nets made the playoffs during that time, but Drazen Petrovic was by far one of the few great players in the 90s. He's one of those players that can handle Jordan a couple times. But I think, to be honest with you, I think this is going to be a really good one. In terms of, I think this is a really good one back then. But nowadays, you have Tatum. You have Jason Tatum. You have Tobias Harris. You have Isaiah Stewart, and of course Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, but now the question is, though, can the Pistons get out of this hole against the Orlando Magic? Because that's the big challenge right now.
We've seen movies like these before when it comes to upsets. We've seen the Jazz as the number one seed getting upsetted. Now, if the Magic could get the job done by tomorrow, this will be the biggest upset they've had. Yes, I know Paolo Bank. Yes, I know Kate Cunningham is not doing well, but this is inexcusable. If you are Pistons fans, what do? Do you come back from a 3-1 lead? Sure. Will Kate Cunningham do his part? Sure. Does the team and defense need to step up? Sure. So my motivation to the Pistons, you need to step up your game. You are the number one seed in the Eastern Conference, and you're playing like this. It's either Kate Cunningham needs to step up, or the coach needs to get his playbook properly,
or possibly a little bit of both. It's like, yeah, they come back from 3-1. Yes, they've done it before, but that was a different era with a different roster. That was when you still had the Larry Brown soon-to-be championship roster coming back from a 3-1 deficit. This time around, you don't have a team with a proven track record until they do otherwise. And the Magic, I mean, they may sometimes underachieve, but in this series, they showed up to play. Desmond Bane has showed up ever since the play-in tournament started. And even if they go on to the second round against either the Cavs or Raptors, probably the Cavs, might be a tougher series than some expect.
If you want to talk about toughest series, the Nets and the Celtics was the toughest. Not the Nets or the Bucks, but the toughest was the Celtics and the Nets. Specifically, they traded away James Harden to the Sixers.
But that's also an example of just because someone's a phenomenal player and a respected player does not automatically make them a good coach. See Mo Cheeks before that.
Exactly. Well, guys, thank you all for watching. I know it's been a very, very rough NFL draft, and I know it's been a rough week for some teams, but have a great night, everyone. Stay safe. Until next time, goodbye, my friends.
All right, thanks for tuning in, everyone. For your boy, Nicky Stees, my co-host, Agent Warrior X, have a great night. We'll catch y'all later. Peace.